going to be Saturday under the lights at Tiger Stadium. And Chris Blair, we look forward to seeing you there. How's everything going for you and LSU this season?
Well, it's nice. I got a very rare two-bye season, so I could get used to that coming off the second bye of the year, which means I had two Saturdays to watch college football, which is a rarity. So 2024 so far so good, and should be highlighted by a big matchup Saturday at Tiger Stadium. It's interesting, we've gone from the BCS to 14 playoff now to a 12-team playoff. And wouldn't you know it, Roger, here we are, week number 9 for LSU. And again, Alabama LSU has implications on the SEC and obviously the college football playoffs, which is why there'll be a ton of eyeballs and ears tuned in to what's happening Saturday night.
Certainly looking forward to it. If you could, for a moment, just kind of take us through the journey this team has been on, starting with week 1 against USC.
Well, I mean, I think it's a team that was led by its offense, and that was certainly on display against USC. I mean, defensively, LSU struggled, and you kind of thought maybe, new coordinator, first game, neutral site, decent team. Then the second week, at home against Nichols, gave up a couple of huge runs, completely out of position, did not set the edge, and again, LSU won that game because their offense was overwhelming, but you start to wonder about this defense. So you go a couple of weeks into the year, and it's like the offense is going to have to win these games each and every time out. And up until last time out against Texas A&M, the defense had progressively gotten better, and I think the turning point was against South Alabama, albeit a non-conference game, but the defense looked like they were where they were supposed to be. There weren't as many busted coverages, and they tackled extremely well. And then that kind of carried over for a couple of weeks, including the big win over Ole Miss, where I thought they really against Ole Miss and Arkansas, I thought defensively they could play with anybody. They took a step back against Texas A&M. Again, the offense did not play well either, but it's still kind of a defense that I don't know, Roger, whether or not we have seen them play their best. Hopefully they haven't, because they're going to need to play much better this coming Saturday. But it's still a team that offensively, I think, can play with most teams. But you never want to be in a situation where you got to outscore, 35-32 or 42-38. So hopefully the defense, I hate to say it, but hopefully it was just an anomaly against Texas A&M. So, but that's really LSU this season. It's not a team that runs the ball very well. In fact, they have struggled running the ball. It's Garrett Nussmeier and a very deep stable of talented receivers. That's the storyline and really the modus operandi of LSU here in 2024.
And speaking of Garrett Nussmeier, when he's playing at his best, what's he doing for this offense?
He's making good decisions, and frankly, he's done that all year, except for the battle against Texas A&M. I mean, those 3 interceptions, he would be the first to tell you that he was trying to make a play and probably would have been better off chucking it away or even eating it, for that matter. The 3 interceptions were not particularly great plays by the A&M defense, although give them credit, they were where they needed to be, but they were just bad throws. The first one was he was on his back foot, about to go out of bounds. He tossed it a good 20 feet up in the air, and at that point, that's anybody's football. The second one, they were trying to get him sprint out to the right, which he does extremely well. He throws extremely well on the run, but that was the only thing they had. The left side of the offensive line was getting just hammered, so he was not only designing to sprint out to the right, he had to run to the right. And eventually Texas A&M said, you know what? We know where the ball's going, so forget covering the receiver. We're going to where the ball is. That was the second interception. So his decision-making has been much better this season. And again, he's got great targets to throw to. Starts with Kyron Lacey and Aaron Anderson, who Alabama fans know. C.J. Daniels, the transfer, who did not play against Texas A&M due to injury. Hopefully he's going to be back. And then a group of tight ends that are extremely talented, big targets, good hands, and maybe deceiving speed, especially for Mason Taylor and Trey'Dez Green. So, he's played extremely well. That was not his best game in Bryan College Station. And, I'll say this about Texas A&M. There's been a bunch of teams, Roger, this year who basically said, we don't think you can run on us, and we're going to use our front 4 to get pressure, and we're going to try to drop 7 deep. And South Carolina tried that early. Arkansas tried it early, and then they got out of it. And eventually they had to start bringing 5 and 6 on blitz packages, and that allowed Garrett to just knife them apart. Texas A&M, the first team that was able to basically rush 4 the entire game and send 7 back into coverage. And that really made that one-dimensional offense for LSU really, really struggle. So, that's kind of the secret. Not that I'm giving away secrets, but it's obviously much harder to do than say. But that's kind of been the only thing that has slowed LSU's offense down is being able to not have to overcommit to rushing the pocket.
Yeah, and just with that in mind, plus running the football, where do things stand right now for LSU on the offensive line?
Well, they're going to be without Garrett Dellinger, who was injured, had a tightrope surgery on his foot, his ankle. They hope he'll be back, maybe optimistically, on the road against Florida, but he will not be in there this week, which, depletes a pretty veteran and really talented offensive line. It's anchored, obviously, by Emory Jones and Will Campbell. But while they have done a very good job of keeping Garrett upright, I mean, they've only given up 4 sacks all season. They gave 2 to South Carolina and 2 to Texas A&M. That's pretty impressive, especially when you got a quarterback who's throwing it 40 to 50 to 51 times a game, that they can protect him. The issue has been not really being able to run the football. And, it's kind of a head scratcher when you look at the guys in the running back room. You got Josh Williams, who's had, a ton of success here. The former walk-on has had some big moments in the run game. Caleb Jackson, who had some big moments last year as a true freshman, really hasn't gotten into the groove. And then Caden Durham has been the bright spot, the true freshman who has got world-class track speed. He runs track for LSU. When he gets loose, there's not many people on the planet that can actually catch him. The problem is they can't get beyond the line of scrimmage, and that's been a problem for the offensive line. But Coach Kelly says it goes much deeper than that. It's the inability of receivers and tight ends to block properly. And it also has fallen on the running backs where they're unable to break first contact. And as well as anybody that's watched the great running backs at Alabama, when their offensive line is good, it's not as if they always give them a giant hole to run through. Sometimes those guys got to break initial contact. So that's kind of where the running game has been. But the offensive line without Dellinger is going to look a little bit different. Paul Mubinga, a young player who they have a lot of hope for and think he's got a big ceiling, but he's going to be thrown into the mix just like he was last week mid-game.
Any other injuries that'll really have an impact on LSU this week?
Well, I mean, Chris Hilton had not played up until last time out. He had been on the shelf since playing in the bowl game on New Year's Day. I don't know how much rust he got off of him against Texas A&M. They went to him a couple of times, targeted him a number of times, just couldn't connect. But he's the real over-the-top guy, and if he's maybe got that rust off, he could be a big factor in the game. C.J. Daniels didn't play. He's been nursing kind of an injury that's plagued him over the last several weeks. And for my money, he and Aaron Anderson are the two go-to guys. Now, Kyron Lacey makes the plays and he gets the highlights. But when you need 6 to 8 yards and you can't run the football and you're going to have to use the passing game as an extension of your running game, C.J. Daniels is that possession receiver. So Coach Kelly said earlier in the week that he is much better than he was this time heading into the Texas A&M game. So hoping to have all those guys back because, again, that makes that wide receiver room a big challenge for defensive coordinators in any defense, really, as to who you're going to bracket. Are you going to double coverage? Who are you going to, cover the tight ends, Mason Taylor and Trey'Dez Green and even Kamorius Pimpton? There's so many times this year. Ole Miss got caught a number of times with a 5'10" safety trying to, face guard Mason Taylor and those tight ends. So the more the receivers are healthy, the better they're going to be. And outside of that, other than the guys who are out for the season, which came early in the year, Jacoby and Guillory and obviously Harold Perkins Jr., everybody, all things considered, pretty healthy going into Game 9.
So as we keep looking at this team, how about on the defensive side of the ball? Who are some of the key playmakers there?
It's Whit Weeks. He has emerged as the linebacker for LSU, and he kind of reminds me of a throwback to the old school SEC linebacker. He is a joy to be around. He's a great young man. Somehow LSU snuck in his brother West out of Kirby country and Watkinsville, Georgia, and they're here in Baton Rouge. And Whit, who's the sophomore, the younger of the two brothers, is one defensive player of the week. He leads the team in tackles. He's near the top in SEC when it comes to tackles. He just knows where to be. The thing I've said about Whit Weeks is, I've seen him catch running backs and receivers in the flat, and you think to yourself, is Whit Weeks that fast that he's catching these guys from behind? And the secret is he knows what angle to take. He's got a very good nose of where the football is going and from point A to point B, and he gets there very quick. So he's not as fast as some of those skill players that he's tackled, but he knows the angles to take. So it starts with Whit Weeks. And, and his success, frankly, has been because of the play of the defensive front and especially the defensive edges. Braden Swinson has become a force in the SEC. He's one of the tops in sacks in conference play. Savion Jones has been a stalwart on the other side on the defensive edge. Coach Kevin Peoples, who came in with Coach Baker, the defensive coordinator, has done a really magnificent job. We thought the defensive rush and the defensive edge would be the weak part along with the secondary this year, and that's anything but. And then you got to give some credit to the guys on the interior. Without Jacoby and Guillory, who is your veteran, they've had to put in a couple of young guys. Shone Washington is one. Ahmad Bro is another. And the reason Whit Weeks and Greg Penn, the other linebacker, along with Braden and Savion, has had success, I think, is because of really maybe the underrated role of the interior lineman defensively for LSU. On the back end, it's still a concern. Zy Alexander certainly is the most veteran. He battled some injury midway through the season, but he seems to be 100%. He'll have his hands full, but he's probably the best corner. And then Major Burns, who has gotten better at safety. He's basically now playing the star position, and it looks like he's kind of come into his own. So Major's playing a lot better there as well. So I think the secondary has improved. It's nowhere near where they want it to be, and it's nowhere near DBU that is come to be expected here at LSU. But they are getting better. But I think you take that Texas A&M game away, they destroyed Connor Wigman. I mean, Wigman couldn't do anything. And the talk, Roger, at halftime, we went into the media room and everybody was saying, as long as they keep Wigman throwing on first down, this is going to be a cakewalk for LSU. That didn't happen. Credit to Coach Elko. They made the switch and changed up the dynamic a little bit with Marcel Reed. And what was hard to fathom was that LSU has faced a number of running quarterbacks at South Carolina. They faced Jackson Dart. They held him in check. It wasn't new. But it appeared they had a hard time adjusting the game plan, which was to get after Wigman and then try to handle the zone read that Marcel Reed was going to be throwing at them or running at them. And they ran right by him a good 5 or 6 times, especially there in the third quarter when Texas A&M started to get their foothold. LSU got pressure. They just went right by him. He pulled the ball, and he was off and running. So, again, they've played much better. They did not look good in Bryan College Station, but they are going to have to play their best game of the season against an Alabama team that, look, both of these teams know you lose Saturday night, all the major goals are off the table. I mean, and for all intents and purposes, this is a playoff game for both LSU and Alabama. That would give Alabama their third loss. It would give LSU their third loss or second loss in SEC play, third loss of the year. They're pretty much on the outside looking in. So, as I said to start this, the implications are big for the conference, big for the playoff, and big for both Alabama and LSU, which means Saturday night, no surprise, it's going to be a huge game once again.
We can't wait to get down there for it and eventually see the Tigers in basketball as well. Basketball kind of on our brains with opening week. What's the excitement level for Coach McMahon and his program getting ready for this year?
Well, without question, Roger, this is the most talented roster Matt McMahon has fielded. He's done a very good job of containing and managing his own roster, keeping a nice core from not only last year, but the year before that, which, as you well know, is kind of unheard of these days in college basketball and college sports. So he had a good core to build around with Jalen Reed, Derek Fountain, Mike Williams, who came on strong as a true freshman last year, and Tyrell Ward. And then he went out and got really a stellar group of backcourt players out of the transfer portal with just a number of guys that I think 3 of the transfer guys have 7,000 minutes of college basketball under their belt. And so they don't really have a dominant inside player, although Damian Collins, the transfer from Kentucky, is 100% healthy. And I think certainly has the ability to play above the rim. He can help you there, but no real back to the basket. So this is going to be a lot like what you see when you sit courtside, which is, I don't know if they'll give Alabama a run for their money on shooting as quick as they do. But it's going to look a lot more like that. And if you look at Matt's success at his previous stop at Murray, that was the type of offense he liked to run. He just did not have the horses to do it in his first 2 years. He feels like he does this year. Again, they'll tip off Wednesday night. We'll find out if they do. But I think the optimism is much higher going into this season than it has the previous two, just based on the roster that he's putting on the floor.
Best of luck with basketball coming up. We'll save baseball for down the road, but football, of course, coming up on Saturday between Alabama and LSU. Chris, thank you for your time. Can't wait to get to Baton Rouge for the ball game. Thank you, and we'll see you Saturday.
You got it, Roger. Thanks for having me and looking forward to it. You guys travel safe, and we'll see you Saturday night in Death Valley.